Dear students, today we'll do chapter 3 of first flight, that is two stories about flying. This lesson has two different stories and both are related to the experiences of flying. The first story is his first flight, written by Lime O'Flaherty, and the second story is The Black Aeroplane, written by Frederick Forsyth. So we'll be starting with the first story, that is his first flight, part 1. In part 1, we'll see that this story, which is written by Lime on O.H. Harty, the reader comes to know about a young seagull bird who is afraid of flying. It feels that its wings are not strong enough to make it fly. How he overcomes this fear, which all of us face while trying a new venture, and the story of his successful maiden flight has been beautifully narrated in the lesson. This story is an account of a young bird that is afraid to fly for the first time. He believes that his wings would not support him. Despite his younger siblings flying fearlessly with much shorter wings, he could not gather the courage to do the same. He was punished to stay hungry if he did not try, and thus it was his mother that compelled him to fly by using food as a trap. The lesson reflects how one hesitates to take the first step and that fear is all in the mind. One should trust one's abilities because the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself. So students, let us start with the chapter. Two stories about flying. The first part is his first flight and the second part is Black Aeroplane. Before you read, since the earliest times humans have dreamt of conquering the skies. Here are two stories about flying. The first part is about a young seagull who is afraid to fly. How does he conquer his fear? And the second part is about a pilot who is lost in storm clouds, and does he arrive safe? Who helps him? That we'll study in part 2. So let us start with the first part, his first flight. The young seagull was alone on its ledge. His two brothers and sisters had already flown away the day before. He had been afraid to fly with them. Somehow, when he had taken a little run forward to break off the ledge and attempted to flap his wings, he became afraid. The great expanse of sea stretched down beneath, and it was such a long way down, miles down. He felt certain that his wings would never support him, so he bent his head and ran away back to the little hole under the ledge where he slept at night. So here we can very well see the meaning of ledge. Ledge is a narrow, horizontal shelf projecting from a wall, or here we can say a cliff. Here you can see in the picture also so students, and brink means the extreme edge of a land before a steep slope or a body or water, and expanse means a wide continuous area of something. So students, the story is about a young seagull who is at that stage of life where he has to learn to fly. Unlike his younger brothers and sisters, he is too afraid to fly. When all of them went for flying for the first time near the edge of the sea, all of them except him succeeded. Reason being, he could not trust his wings. He got very much terrified by the vast sea and got convinced that he could never fly. And as a result, he was very much ashamed and disheartened, and thus he went inside the ledge where usually he slept. So let us come to the next line. Even when each of his brothers and his little sister, whose wings were far shorter than his own, ran to the brink, flapped their wings, and flew away, he failed to muster up courage to take the plunge. Muster here means to collect, which appeared to him so desperate. His father and mother had come around, calling to him shrilly, upbraiding him, threatening to let him starve on his ledge unless he flew away. But for the life of him, he could not move. So here what we see is his younger siblings managed to take their first flight despite their wings being shorter than his. But he could not summon the courage. He could not gather that much of courage. He could not collect that much of courage, though he tried so desperately. He was scolded by his parents for not trying again, but he was so afraid that he could not even move. So the next line, that was 24 hours ago. Since then, nobody had come near him. The day before, all day long, he had watched his parents flying about with his brothers and sister, perfecting them in the art of flight, teaching them how to skim the waves and how to dive for fish. He had, in fact, seen his older brother catch his first herring and devour it standing on a rock, while his parents circled around, raising a proud cackle, and all the morning the whole family had walked about on the big plateau midway down the opposite cliff, taunting him with his cowardice. So herring here means a soft finned sea fish. Devour is to eat quickly. Cackle means to laugh in a loud way. So now he had been alone for a day after he tried because his parents were busy focusing on his siblings. They helped his siblings master the art of flying and diving for food. His older sibling even caught his first fish, which he proudly ate at a rock, while his parents celebrated it. That morning, his parents taunted him all the way that he has been a coward. The sun was now ascending the sky, blazing on his ledge that faced the south. He felt the heat because he had not eaten since the previous nightfall. He stepped slowly out to the brink of the ledge and standing on one leg with the other leg hidden under his wing. He closed one eye, then the other. And pretended to be falling asleep. Still, they took no notice of him. He saw his two brothers and his sister lying on the plateau, dozing with their heads sunk into their necks. His father was preening. Preening means making an effort to maintain feathers. His father was preening the feathers on his white back. Only his mother was looking at him. She was standing on a little high hump on the plateau, her white breast thrust forward. Now and again, She tore at a piece of fish that lay at her feet and then scraped each side of her beak on the rock. The sight of the food maddened him. How he loved to tear food that way, scraping his beak now and again to wet it. Wet means to sharpen it. So, students, now the sun had now risen, and he was feeling the heat more than ever because he was now empty stomach, because since the night before he has not eaten anything. So he stepped out of his ledge and pretended to sleep on one leg just to gain the attention of his family. But still, no one noticed him. His siblings were sleeping, and his father was cleaning his feathers with his beak, and his mother was standing on another plateau eating fish while she noticed him. The seagull got mad on seeing the fish because he was very hungry. He loved to tear away fish and scrap his beak now and then. "Ga, ga, ga," he cried, begging her to bring him some food. "Go, cool, ah," she screamed back derisively, but he kept calling plaintively, and after a minute or so, he uttered a joyful scream. His mother had picked up a piece of the fish and was flying across to him with it. He leaned out eagerly, tapping the rock with his feet, trying to get nearer to her as she flew across. But when she was just opposite to him, she halted, her wings motionless. The piece of fish in her beak almost within reach of his beak. He waited a moment in surprise, wondering why she did not come nearer. And then, maddened by hunger, he dived at the fish. So now, students, he cried in hunger to his mom, while his mother screamed back angrily. But he kept crying, which soon turned into a joyful scream at the sight of his mother flying towards him. And she was carrying the piece of fish. He got excited as she came nearer and leaned forward. But suddenly the mother stopped not too far from him, and out of excitement and hunger, he dived at the fish without realizing for a moment that he was afraid to fly. So let us continue with the next line. With a loud scream, he fell outwards and downwards into space. Then a monstrous terror seized him, and his heart stood still. He could hear nothing, but it only lasted a minute. The next moment, he felt his wings spread outwards. The wind rushed against his breast feathers. Then under his stomach and against his wings, he could feel the tips of his wings cutting through the air. He was not falling headlong now. He was soaring gradually downwards and outwards. He was no longer afraid. He just felt a bit dizzy. Then he flapped his wings. Then he flapped his wings once and he soared upwards. Ga, 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 ga. Ga, cool, eh. His mother swooped past him, her wings making a loud noise. He answered her with another scream. Then his father flew over him screaming. He saw his two brothers and his sisters flying around him, curvetting, banking, and soaring and diving. Curvetting means to perform a series of jumps on the hind legs. Now the seagull got so excited that he fell as soon as he tried. For a moment he was in shock and stood still out of terror. All this lasted only for a moment, and soon his feathers opened as he flight. He could feel the wind against his breast feathers, stomach, and his wings. He could feel himself cutting through the air. He was not afraid anymore. He was just a bit nervous, but then his mother accompanied him. The whole family screamed out of excitement, thus celebrating the victory over fear. Then he completely forgot that he had not always been able to fly, and commanded himself to dive and soar and curve, shrieking shrilly. He was near the sea now, flying straight over it, facing straight out over the ocean. He saw a vast green sea beneath him, with little ridges moving over it, and he turned his beak sideways and cawed amusedly. So students, once the seagull overcame his fear, he totally forgot that he was once afraid of it. He did all those things he once feared. He flied straight over the sea, and now he could see the greenery and the mountains beneath him. He screamed out of joy as he enjoyed the victory. His parents and his brothers and sisters had landed on this green flooring ahead of him. They were beckoning to him, calling shrilly. He dropped his legs to stand on the green sea. His legs sank into it. He screamed with fright and attempted to rise again, flapping his wings. But he was tired and weak with hunger, and he could not rise, exhausted by the strange exercise. His feet sank into the green sea, and then his belly touched it, and he sank no farther. He was floating on it, and around him his family was screaming, praising him, and their beaks were offering him scraps of dogfish. Now he had made his first flight. So students, when he landed, his family landed along with him as a gesture that they were proud of the seagull. They were screaming and shouting out of excitement in their high-pitched voices. He then went into the sea, where at first he got scared and thus panicked. He tried escaping, but got tired and weak because of hunger. And then he calmed down. He started floating in the sea he was once afraid of. Now his family was celebrating in excitement and offered him food as praise. Finally, he had overcome his fear and had made his first successful attempt, his first flight. So students, we have seen that the chapter His First Flight highlights the importance of independence, self-belief and confidence, and the need for motivation to attain goals. Sometimes it needs an initial push to channel your efforts towards creation. The story also highlights that everyone needs to be independent, even while staying involved in the family life. Here we have seen that the parents of the seagull had tried to coax and even threaten him in different ways to be independent, but it was of none of the use, to no avail. And the mother knew well that the trick was to arouse his need, and she eventually pushed him to fly using his hunger. So here we end the chapter. This is the end of the chapter. Whatever queries and doubts you'll be having, we'll be sorting it out in the Zoom session. Till then, goodbye everyone.